1990s, specifically between 1992 and 1996, Seattle, Washington, a city that suddenly became the bank robbery capital of America. Hundreds of banks were robbed. Most of the criminals were eventually caught, but one robber kept outsmarting the FBI. Every time he struck, he wore a different disguise. Every time, the plan was perfect, and every time, millions of dollars disappeared. But this robber wasn't just stealing money, he was threatening lives. His message was clear: anyone who gets in my way won't leave alive. The FBI had no fingerprints, no clear face, and no solid leads. There was only one thing in common. After every crime, another bank was left empty. Slowly, the agents began to realize something. Maybe there was only one way to stop this man, to catch him in the act. For every teller, every day felt like a nightmare. A man standing at the counter, a gun barrel pointed straight at their face. Banks started installing security cameras. They set up silent alarms, and they introduced new security devices, all in the hope of finally stopping the robber. But the robber was always one step ahead of every system. And the most terrifying part, he had already made his message clear: I won't stop until someone stops me. The only question was, would the FBI catch him first, or would he rob another bank and disappear again? The hunt had begun. Exploding die packs, every possible security system was used. But against this elusive bank robber, Seattle's banks proved completely helpless. This was no ordinary thief. He was targeting Seattle directly, and after every robbery, he would vanish, mocking the system behind him. By now, the FBI understood something clearly. Raw power alone wouldn't be enough to catch this man. They would need cunning, laser-sharp precision, and endless patience. Because this wasn't an ordinary criminal. He was a master of disguise. To the FBI, he was known by only one name: Hollywood. Seattle, Washington, 1992. The computer revolution was rapidly taking off. Tech entrepreneurs were pouring billions of dollars into the city's economy. And with this new wave of wealth came new opportunities. And the banks? Seeing this surge of wealth, they opened branches all across Seattle. More money, more banks, and one thief waiting for the perfect opportunity. Before the FBI even realized it, Hollywood had already planned his next move. The question was, would technology help the FBI win, or would one man's disguises defeat the entire system? The game was on. Neighborhood convenience meant one thing: more opportunities and more crime. June 25th, early afternoon, Seattle First Bank, Hawthorne Branch. It was a normal afternoon, until suddenly, fear walked through the bank's front door. Two men, faces hidden behind disguises, guns in their hands. One robber immediately pointed his gun at the customers. Anyone who doesn't cooperate will be shot right here. The second robber moved behind the counter. His voice was cold, but the threat was deadly. Teller, empty the cash drawer, now. Hands were shaking, breaths were frozen in fear, and the only sound in the room was cash dropping into the bag. The bag was full, but the story wasn't over yet. Their eyes suddenly locked on a customer, someone they had seen parking a car outside earlier. Give me the keys, now. The car was theirs now too, and as they walked out, they left behind one final warning. Don't hit the alarm. Don't call the police. If we come back, no one here will leave alive. The door slammed shut, the engine started, and two shadows disappeared once again into the streets of Seattle. All they left behind was fear, and one question: who was this robber, and which bank would be next? the hunt was far from over. The two robbers had already sped away in the car with nearly $20,000 in cash. Because the bank's deposits were insured by the federal government, the case immediately fell under FBI jurisdiction. Now, alongside Seattle police, the FBI joined the hunt. But there was one major problem. No alarm had been triggered, and when the alarm didn't go off, the security cameras never activated either, which meant no photos, no video, just darkness. Investigators had only the statements from customers and bank employees to work with. The gunman was described as medium height, medium build. Nothing particularly distinctive. No one could clearly remember his face. But then, a small clue appeared. One employee recalled hearing something. While the cash was being stuffed into the bag, one robber called out to his partner, Mark. Was it a real name or just a fake? No one knew. And as if that wasn't enough, both robbers had been wearing gloves, which meant no fingerprints, no physical evidence. All that remained was a perfectly planned crime and an FBI team forced to start from zero. The question was Mark a mistake or just another deception? For Seattle, this was only the beginning. Fingerprints? Nothing. The gloves had wiped everything clean. But investigators refused to give up. From the desk where one robber had been standing, they tried to lift shoe prints. They found partial tread marks, which suggested the robber was wearing sneakers. Meanwhile, the license plate number of the customer's stolen car was carefully recorded by investigators. The car was a Cadillac sedan. Just a few hours later, the Cadillac was found, abandoned, in a neighborhood not far from the bank. Forensic technicians carefully searched every inch of the vehicle, the seats, the steering wheel, the door handles, the carpet. But what they discovered was even more unsettling. No fingerprints, no hair, no fibers, nothing that didn't already belong to the car itself. It was as if the vehicle had never been touched at all. And then, 7 weeks passed. No leads, no suspects, no new clues. For the Seattle police and the FBI, the case was slowly turning into a ghost. Only one question remained. Would the robber strike again, or had he vanished forever? Because sometimes, silence is the most terrifying clue of all. And then, Friday, August 14th, Seattle had begun to believe the danger had passed. But inside Sandbank, fear walked in once again. This time, there was only one thief, alone. But the disguise was completely different. He arrived in a truck, his face covered in heavy theatrical makeup, so thick that no one could recognize his real appearance. One teller immediately had a feeling. It's the same man. She recognized his voice, his confidence, and the way he held the gun. Don't press the alarm. Fill the drawer. All of it. This time, his take was more than $8,000 in cash, and this was only the beginning. Over the next 3 months, Seattle turned into a nightmare. 4 more banks, 4 more robberies, and every time, the same pattern. A solo gunman, heavy theatrical makeup on his face, a hat on his head, and dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. It was almost like he was performing on a stage, not just for the people in the bank, but also for the FBI as well. And every time he showed the same weapon, a Glock pistol, cold, controlled, and completely professional. By now, the FBI was certain of one thing. This wasn't a random robber. This was a serial bank robber. And Seattle had become his personal playground. Only one question remained. Was this the real face of Hollywood, or just another mask? In his hand was a 9mm pistol, and his warning was crystal clear. Anyone who tries to stop me won't leave alive. By the 6th robbery, the thief had already taken $252,000 in cash, and once again, vanished into thin air. And the FBI? They were still in the dark. No name, no face, no solid lead. Then, the case was taken over by Special Agent Sean Johnson from the FBI Seattle field office. His focus was on one thing: tracking down this master of disguise, the man everyone now knew as Hollywood. Giving someone a nickname makes it easier. Otherwise, we'd keep saying, "a tall white guy wearing a blue hat," Johnson later explained. But in Hollywood's case, it wasn't just about the clothes. Every time he wore an elaborate facial disguise, the makeup looked so realistic, like an actor completely transforming for a role. It was almost as if he wasn't robbing banks, he was performing on a stage. And after every performance, he disappeared without leaving a single trace. For the FBI, this was no longer just a robbery. It had become something bigger: Hollywood versus the system. The question was, would his next disguise become his biggest mistake? Because the clock was ticking. The makeup was so realistic and theatrical that some people even joked, "This guy looks like he came straight out of Hollywood." And just like that, the name stuck: Hollywood. See First Bank, Hawthorne Branch, Northeast Seattle. This was where Hollywood carried out his last known strike, and what he walked away with was more than $250,000. By that point, Hollywood had already stolen over $320,000 from banks across Seattle. Authorities recovered not a single dollar. No hidden stash, no spending trail, no mistakes. And the most chilling part, even now, there was no clue to his identity. No name, no face, no past. It was as if this man only existed during the robberies, and the rest of the time, he simply disappeared into thin air. Months went by. The banks were quiet. No new robberies. But investigators couldn't stop asking themselves one question: had Hollywood quit? Or was he simply waiting for his next act? Because the FBI knew one thing: criminals like this don't disappear without a reason. Sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all. Investigators began to think maybe Hollywood had moved on to another city. Then came November 24th, 1993, almost 1 year later, and suddenly Hollywood was back. In his hand was his trademark Glock pistol. His voice was cold, but completely in control. No funny moves. The customers were forced into a corner together. The fear in the room was so heavy, even breathing felt difficult. And then, Hollywood chose the very same bank where he had once walked away with $250,000. See First Bank, Hawthorne Branch. Almost as if the bank was his personal ATM. But this time, he didn't just demand the cash in the drawers. His demand was even bigger this time. "Show me the reserve cash." He looked at the money, but it wasn't enough. Hollywood's next order was even more terrifying. Open the vault door. Now. The back room, a heavy vault door. Every second felt like an entire year. And then Hollywood walked out, a bag in his hand. Inside, nearly $100,000. A year of waiting, a perfect return. And for the FBI, it sent a clear message. Hollywood had never really disappeared. He had simply paused. The second act had begun. Every time Hollywood entered a bank, his warning was always the same: hit the alarm and nobody leaves alive. And this time too, no one dared to disobey him. When Hollywood walked into a bank, he wasn't just a gunman. He became the master of the entire situation. Every move carefully planned, every second under control. Yes, he appeared calm, almost polite, but behind that calm, people felt no comfort at all, because everyone knew one thing: this man wasn't afraid to use his weapon. He didn't just show the gun, he pointed it directly at people. Customers, tellers, everyone. And the FBI had begun to understand something important. Hollywood wasn't just a criminal who made threats. If anyone refused to follow his orders, he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. That's why when Hollywood walked into a bank, no one tried to be a hero. No alarms were triggered. Only 3 things filled the room: fear, silence, and his voice. Because Hollywood didn't just play a role, he was ready to end the scene. Anyone standing in front of him did exactly what he demanded. At the time, Seattle's banks were fully prepared when it came to security. They used marked bills, so stolen money could be traced later. Hidden between the stacks of cash were dye packs, small devices filled with bright red explosive dye and an electronic charge. The moment a thief crossed the exit sensors, the pack would detonate, covering the robber in bright red dye. Banks also installed silent alarms, allowing tellers to signal the police without making a sound. And in every corner, there were video cameras, leaving no angle uncovered. The theory was perfect, the plan was solid, but the reality? Hollywood won every time. The dye packs never exploded, the alarms never went off, and the cameras never captured his real face. It was almost as if he already knew every security system in advance. Or perhaps someone on the inside was guiding him. Seattle's banks were doing everything they could, but one man kept defeating the entire system. Only one question remained. Was Hollywood surviving on luck, or was he smarter than the system itself? Because the perfect robbery doesn't happen by accident. July 13th, 1994. 2 years later, Hollywood was back again, and this time, darker than ever. Now he didn't just show a gun, he pulled out a stun gun, an electric threat, instant pain. He gave the bank employees a direct warning. One more move, and electricity runs through your body. But behind the counter, one teller decided to risk everything. Their hands were shaking, but their mind was clear. Quietly, they triggered the silent alarm. Hollywood was busy collecting the cash, completely unaware that outside, police patrol units were racing toward the bank at full speed. Hollywood walked out of the bank with nearly $112,000 in cash. Outside, a witness saw something important. Hollywood jumped into a dark blue Dodge Caravan, and he wasn't alone. There was another man inside the vehicle, the driver, which meant Hollywood had a partner. The witness tried to catch the license plate number, but couldn't. The vehicle was moving too fast, and the plan had clearly been prepared in advance. Police secured the scene. Bank employees began to give their statements, and then one employee revealed something that was about to take the investigation in a completely new direction. Because for the first time, Hollywood had left a crack in the script. The next morning, when a bank employee arrived at work, something strange kept running through their mind. They told the police that a day earlier, they had seen a man standing outside the bank. The man was across the street, writing notes on a pad, and parked nearby was a blue Dodge Caravan. His face? Blurry. The distance had been too far. I couldn't clearly see his face, the witness said, but he didn't look like a normal customer. Special Agent Sean Johnson immediately realized something. This was no coincidence. For the investigators, the picture was finally becoming clearer. Hollywood didn't just show up and rob banks. He studied them first, not for hours, but sometimes for days. He learned the bank's layout, who came and went, customers, employees, security guards, what times the bank was less crowded, which moments would give him maximum control. Hollywood wasn't just stealing money, he was playing a game of planning and precision. And the most frightening part, his planning was working. One by one, Seattle's banks had become open scripts for his next performance. The only question was, would the FBI figure him out in time, or would Hollywood always stay one step ahead? Because now, the reconnaissance had finally been revealed. By this point, Hollywood had already stolen more than $660,000, outsmarting the entire system. Investigators began to notice a pattern. He often struck on Wednesdays or Thursdays, almost as if every robbery was part of a perfect weekday plan. And then, 6 months later, Hollywood appeared again. The bag was filling with cash. Everything seemed routine. But then something unusual happened. A teller heard a faint radio sound coming under his coat. Exit. Now. Hollywood turned, quick steps, straight toward the bank's exit. And the moment he crossed the exit sensors, the dye pack exploded. Red dye, smoke, chaos. For the first time, Hollywood had failed. He ran, but the script had finally broken. Outside, a witness managed to do something that no one had ever done before. Write down the getaway car's license plate number. It wasn't just a number, it was Hollywood's first real mistake. Special Agent Sean Johnson ran the plate through the system, and for the first time, the FBI had a solid lead. Hollywood's luck was finally running out. The mask was cracking, and the final act was about to begin. We ran the license plate, and the vehicle was traced. Records showed that the car was registered in Tacoma, Washington, a city just south of Seattle. Special Agent Sean Johnson personally traveled there. He spoke to the couple whose names appeared in the vehicle registration records. The question was simple. How did your car end up being sold? The couple explained that they had advertised the vehicle in a local newspaper. A buyer showed up. No bargaining, no test drive. Just one simple statement. I'll take it. $1,200 in cash. The buyer's description? A white male, late 30s to early 40s, medium height, medium build, plain, normal, almost completely unremarkable. And perhaps that was his greatest advantage. Based on that description, a sketch artist began to work. The pencil moved, lines formed, and slowly a face began to appear. For the first time, the FBI finally had a face for Hollywood. His real face. No makeup, no disguise, no sunglasses. Just a man who had spent years deceiving the entire system. Because now, the mask was finally coming off. This was believed to be Hollywood's possible face. Spring 1995. For Seattle, this wasn't just another season. It was the peak of fear. A masked gunman had already robbed 12 banks, nearly $1 million stolen, and behind it all, very few clues. Investigators had given him the name Hollywood because every robbery involved theatrical makeup and elaborate disguises. Now the FBI had only two things. One, a sketch, and two, a hope that this sketch might reveal the real face behind the mask. Special Agent Sean Johnson was now searching for only one thing, a pattern. If I can find similarities, he said, then maybe I can predict when and where the next robbery will happen. Johnson went back to every bank Hollywood had ever robbed. He studied the locations, the timing, the entry points, the exit routes. Something had to be repeating, because when you finally understand a criminal's pattern, the entire game can change. And the FBI knew one thing. Hollywood's next act wasn't far away. The question was no longer who he was, but where he would appear next. I went back to every bank Hollywood had struck since June of '92. Special Agent Sean Johnson wasn't just reviewing files, he was going out into the field. Every detail mattered. How many doors did the bank have? What did the lobby layout look like? Where was the vault located? Downstairs, upstairs, or on the main floor? How big was the parking lot? Was it attached to the bank or across the street? And what kind of street was it? A busy highway? A commercial strip? Or a quiet back road? Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Johnson noticed that most of the banks were located in commercial districts. Businesses nearby made regular deposits there, which meant more cash and predictable timing. Hollywood wasn't just choosing banks, he was studying the system itself. And the more Johnson began to understand, the more unsettling the realization became. Because if the FBI was starting to crack the pattern, then Hollywood probably already chosen his next target. 2 minds, 1 game, and the board was Seattle. These banks weren't just located in commercial areas. Many were right next to residential neighborhoods. And that was one of Hollywood's smartest strategies. He blended perfectly into the crowd. A normal man, in a normal neighborhood, with nothing suspicious about him at all. Hollywood seemed to favor 3 specific areas of the city: Northeast Seattle, Madison Park, just outside downtown, and West Seattle. 3 different zones, but the same pattern. For Agent Sean Johnson, the picture was now almost complete. The types of banks, the branch layouts, the specific areas of the city, everything was starting to match. "We created a list of likely targets," Johnson said. At that point, this was no longer just an investigation. It had become a prediction. March 1995. It had been 3 years since Hollywood's first robbery, and that's when a major decision was made. The Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force was officially formed. Multiple agencies, shared intelligence, one mission: stop Hollywood. Because the FBI understood something important. If this task force failed, Hollywood's next act could become even more dangerous. The hunter and the hunted were finally moving on the same map. The task force was filled with top investigators from 5 different agencies, different uniforms, but one mission: to take Hollywood off the streets. Data analysis began revealing some disturbing patterns. Hollywood often struck around midday, and almost always during the last 3 days of the work week: Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. But there was something else. In his last 5 robberies, 4 had happened in late January or early February. It was almost as if he wasn't just following opportunity, he was following a calendar. Agents calculated something else. Hollywood was spending about $20,000 a month, which meant he had to strike again. The money would eventually run out. June 1995. The task force gained another heavy hitter, Detective Mike McGann. McGann knew every street in Seattle, and he already had dozens of bank robbery arrests to his name. He wasn't a rookie. He was the kind of investigator who could read the mind of a robber. McGann knew one thing: when the pressure rises, criminals start making mistakes. And the pressure on Hollywood was now at its peak. The countdown had begun. This time, the streets were watching him back. "In my experience," Detective McGann said, "about 95% of the people I arrest are narcotics users. The other 5%, gamblers, thrill seekers, professionals, or people acting out of pure desperation. Hollywood, however, fit into a completely different category. He was trained, he was disciplined, a professional." McGann studied the security camera photos again and again, every frame, every angle. But he wasn't just looking at the face, he was studying the weapons. The weapons Hollywood used: a 9mm Glock, a stun gun, At the time, both of these were considered weapons of choice in the criminal world, which meant this wasn't a random selection. Hollywood followed trends. He chose the best tools. He calculated risk. This man wasn't robbing banks for adrenaline. He was working. And when a criminal starts treating crime like a profession, that's when they become the most dangerous. Because professionals don't panic, they plan. For law enforcement, the most disturbing observation was now becoming clear. Detective McGann noticed something unusual. Hollywood never kept his finger on the trigger. He kept his trigger finger indexed along the side of the gun. That's not a random habit. It's a technique taught to police officers during firearms training. And the timing of the robberies, most of them happened late in the morning, exactly when Seattle police shifts were changing, which meant slower response times, more confusion, the perfect window. All the evidence was beginning to point toward a disturbing possibility. Hollywood might actually be a cop. I thought he might be a police officer, Detective McGann said, because he understood exactly how we operate. He wasn't just taking advantage of the system, he seemed to know it from the inside. Either he had been carefully observing police operations, or he was somehow listening to their radio traffic. Whatever the explanation, one thing had become clear. Hollywood wasn't just robbing banks, he was using law enforcement's own rules against them. And if he really was a cop, then this case was no longer just a manhunt. It had become a nightmare from inside the badge. Because when the hunter knows the hunt, no one is truly safe. Hollywood was disciplined, almost military style. Inside the banks, he worked in seconds. No panic, no unnecessary movements. He walked in and walked right back out. He had a deep understanding of bank policies and procedures, which counter would display the cash, which areas had blind spots, where delays could happen and where they couldn't. And perhaps the smartest part, he often targeted banks in residential neighborhoods, places where police presence was lighter, response times were slower, the risk was lower. Hollywood wasn't surviving on luck. He had already studied both the map and the system. Then Detective Mike McGann noticed something else. On Hollywood's belt, there was a radio. If he was using a walkie-talkie, that meant he was communicating with someone. And if he was communicating, then maybe his frequency could be intercepted. McGann immediately contacted an electronics expert known to everyone by one nickname, the Glitch. He was the guy who understood signals, who could break down radio frequencies, and uncover the secrets behind communications equipment. For the first time, Hollywood's most powerful advantage, his communication system, might finally be turned against him. If you can hear the criminal, you can catch him. Detective Mike McGann believed they might finally have the upper hand. He sat down with the Glitch and showed him the surveillance photos of Hollywood. In the images, one thing was clearly visible, a two-way radio attached to his belt. The Glitch recognized it instantly. Radios like this usually operate on two common frequencies. Two possible windows. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Set up a radio scanner in an unmarked car, listen to Hollywood's communications, trace his location, and catch him in the act. Investigators believed for the first time they might actually hear Hollywood speaking. Maybe he would even reveal a mistake himself. But the idea didn't work. The scanner stayed silent. No voice, no signal. Either Hollywood was even smarter than they thought, or he only used the radio when no one could intercept it. Whatever the reason, one thing became clear. Hollywood was always one step ahead of every plan. Even when they listened, he stayed silent. Northeast Seattle. Agent Sean Johnson sat outside a bank monitoring the radio. The time was around 11:30 a.m. The plan was simple. If nothing happened, they would break off the operation at noon. And then, everything changed. The police radio crackled to life. Seattle police to all units. Bank robbery reported. First Interstate Bank. Johnson froze. The distance? Just 2 miles away. Then came the suspect's physical description, and in that moment, everything became clear. I knew immediately, this was Hollywood. The timing matched perfectly. The same 3 days of the week, almost exactly like the year before. Hollywood had returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. Inside the bank, there was a struggle with an accomplice. Outside, a bystander suddenly found themselves pulled into the story. No one knew what was about to happen in the next few seconds, because now, this wasn't just another robbery. This was a chance to catch Hollywood in the act. The hunter had heard the call, and this time, he was close. Outside the bank, a bystander once again managed to write down the license plate number, almost exactly like what had happened during one of Hollywood's earlier robberies. The getaway car was quickly found abandoned in a nearby neighborhood, not far from the bank. The FBI traced the vehicle to its registered owner. The owner explained that he had sold the car a few weeks ago for cash. The buyer, the same story investigators had heard before, an unknown man. No paperwork, no test drive. An agent showed the owner the vehicle again and asked a simple question. Now that you're seeing the car again, does anything look different? The owner answered without hesitation. Yeah, overall it looks the same, but the battery is new. A new battery. That wasn't a small detail. Agents began examining the vehicle inside and out. Everything had been wiped clean. Seats, dashboard, door handles. It looked like someone had carefully removed every trace of themselves. But one thing was clear. Hollywood didn't just run away. He prepared for the next move. A new battery meant the car had been kept ready for repeated use. The real question was this vehicle meant to be his next escape again, or had Hollywood just made his biggest mistake yet? Sometimes it's the smallest detail that cracks a case. The owner noticed something else. 2 of the car's tires were new. Agents immediately traced the tires. The result? They had been purchased in Tacoma, Washington. Then investigators pulled the records for the battery purchase. It came from a Sears store in Tacoma. The purchase date? Just 2 days after the car had been bought. And at that moment, the picture became crystal clear. Agent Sean Johnson explained, that meant whoever bought the car, whether it was Hollywood or one of his partners, had been in the area at least 2 months before the robbery, which meant planning, scouting, preparation. The owner then sat down with a sketch artist and gave a detailed description of the buyer. The pencil moved, lines formed, and soon the FBI now had 2 composite sketches, 2 faces, 2 possible suspects. But the truth was, Hollywood was still a shadow. They had the sketches, but not the names. They had the faces, but not the identities. Investigators were getting closer, but not close enough. 2 faces, 0 names, and the criminal still free. To catch Hollywood, simply waiting wasn't enough anymore. That's when Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser stepped in. She took command of the task force and made a bold decision. No more playing defense. Now we go on the attack. As she explained, sitting behind the desk and solving a case on paper is one thing, but taking a proactive posture, knowing you're dealing with someone like Hollywood, that's a completely different game. It meant agents would be out on the streets, outside banks, undercover, alert. And it also meant something else. Every move would carry greater risk. Glasser understood that as the pressure increased, Hollywood would begin to feel cornered. And when a trained, disciplined professional feels cornered, they can become even more dangerous. She also knew this aggressive strategy could put her agents directly in harm's way. But the choice was clear. Either Hollywood makes the next move, or someone else might. A trap had now been set for Hollywood. The plan was simple, but deadly risky. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, every week during those same time windows, we'll be out on the streets. Investigators believed in one powerful force: greed. No matter how much money Hollywood had stolen, greed would eventually pull him back. And then, May 22nd, 1996, police presence across the city had increased. Every bank was on the watch list, yet somehow, Hollywood returned. This time, the target was First Interstate Bank in Madison Park, an affluent, quiet suburb of Seattle. exactly the kind of place where no one expected trouble. It was his 14th known robbery. 14 times he had outsmarted the system. 14 times he had escaped capture. And now, Hollywood had proven once again, his game wasn't over yet. To generate new leads, agents began reaching out to the community. The reward was increased to $50,000. The message was clear: if you know something, now is the time to speak. But investigators also had another concern: the media. They didn't want Hollywood to be turned into a public hero, or worse, for someone to watch the coverage and become a copycat robber. Finding the balance was critical, alerting the public while preventing the fear from turning into glamorization. In Madison Park, hundreds of wanted posters were plastered everywhere, on poles, on bulletin boards, on every street corner. There was only one hope: that someone might have seen something, that someone might remember something. If the public stayed alert, maybe this entire neighborhood would become too risky for Hollywood to return. And then, law enforcement would tighten the net even further, because now the target wasn't just the banks anymore. Now the target was Hollywood himself. In surrounding neighborhoods, manpower was increased as well, but the campaign produced no results. Hollywood had vanished, as if he had simply disappeared into thin air. That's when investigators brought in a police profiler, a man trained to look inside the mind of a criminal. The profiler studied the case files, analyzed the patterns, and then delivered a chilling conclusion. This is not a typical criminal. Hollywood's violent tendencies, his high-level planning, and his knowledge of law enforcement procedures all pointed to one thing: this man understands the system, possibly from the inside or from past experience. And then came the most dangerous warning: if he's cornered, he will not surrender. He will not go into custody. He will resist. And if given the chance, he will fight. For the agents, the message was crystal clear. This wouldn't simply be an arrest. It would be a confrontation. And when Hollywood finally appeared, someone's life would be on the line. Hollywood was considered extremely dangerous. Authorities could only guess when and where he would strike next. But the biggest question remained: would his gun stay silent this time? For nearly 4 years, Hollywood had delivered the same threat inside every bank he robbed: if anyone gets in my way, there will be gunfire. The agents were absolutely certain: if he was ever challenged, this masked gunman would shoot to kill. By 1996, there was only one name terrifying Seattle: Hollywood. A masked shadow who had robbed 14 banks, threatened dozens of people with death, and stolen $1.2 million over 4 years. Yes, he hadn't pulled the trigger yet, but the agents knew this wasn't peace. This was simply the calm before the storm. And when Hollywood finally fired his gun, it wouldn't be a warning shot. Agents believed one thing with absolute certainty: if Hollywood was ever cornered, someone would die. That's why Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser stood before the task force with a chilling reminder. The lights dimmed and a video began to play. This wasn't just a normal training clip. This was an FBI nightmare. Miami, 1986. A violent gunfight that left 2 FBI agents dead and several others wounded. Ellen said, "This video is shown in FBI training so no one ever forgets." That day, agents were also conducting surveillance on dangerous bank robbery suspects, and what happened next became history. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Just like April 11, 1986, the situation in Seattle now looked the same. Armed suspects, a surveillance operation. One mistake, and bodies on the ground. The message was loud and clear. If we're not prepared, the next training video might be our story. Miami, 1986. The FBI confronted two armed bank robbers, and then a shootout erupted. The gunmen kept advancing while the agents struggled to reload their revolvers. Seconds mattered, but those seconds weren't enough. 2 FBI agents were killed. 5 others were seriously wounded. The Miami shootout wasn't just an incident, it was a warning. A reminder of how high the stakes become when violent robbers are cornered. Ellen Glasser said, "We can't always be 100% prepared, but we can't go in without a plan." So a decision was made. No more chaos, no more confusion. To make sure a tragedy like Miami would never happen again in Seattle, uniform procedures were created between multiple law enforcement agencies. Roles were clearly defined, command structures established, backup units prepared. And when it came to a high-risk confrontation, the Seattle SWAT team was placed on the front line. Because the next encounter wouldn't be training, it would be a real battle. The Seattle SWAT team trained shoulder to shoulder with Special Agent Sean Johnson. Intensive drills, advanced firearms training, felony car stop procedures, how to safely remove suspects from vehicles. Every possible scenario was rehearsed. What if Hollywood robbed another bank? Who would move first? Who would give the command? All of this was happening under the direct supervision of Ellen Glasser, and her number one concern was crystal clear: everyone's safety, the agents, and the civilians. Detective Mike McGann knew one thing: training alone wasn't enough. Everyone has to be on the same page. That's why these drills served another purpose: testing communication. Because the truth was, the FBI and local police didn't always speak the same language. Different radios, different procedures, different habits, and even a small misunderstanding could turn into a disaster. When facing Hollywood, it wouldn't just be about guns. Coordination had to be perfect. At the same time, every officer and agent was ordered to wear clothing with clearly visible law enforcement markings, so that even in the middle of chaos, no one would be mistaken for the enemy. Safety came first. Thanksgiving was approaching. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser believed we're as prepared as we can possibly be. And then came Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, 1996. At first, it seemed like a normal day. One agent later said, "I thought I'd just spend the day catching up on some paperwork." No one realized this wouldn't be a day remembered for paperwork. It would become part of history. Because Hollywood had already made his move. Everyone was in holiday mode. Tomorrow with Thanksgiving, banks were about to close. A brief moment of calm, a short breath before the holiday. Agents were thinking, everyone's worked hard. Maybe it's time for a little break. Back at the office, only a few people were remaining. Ellen Blasted, Detective Mike McGann, and Detective Pete Erickson. And then, 5:41 p.m., the alert tone sounded over the radio. Beep! That single sound seemed to freeze the entire room. Detective Mike McGann later said, "The moment I heard it, I knew. This was Hollywood." He looked around the office. Only Pete was there. Their eyes met. McGann asked, "You want to go?" Pete didn't hesitate. "Oh yeah, let's go." And in that moment, everything was clear. As I ran down the hallway, Ellen spotted me. "Mike, what's going on?" I shouted back, "Hollywood just hit a bank. You coming?" Not even a second of hesitation. Yes. She grabbed her coat, and the three of them rushed out of the task force office. My car was parked right outside the front door. We ran to it, lights on, sirens on, radio alive with chatter. And then we took off. The report was clear. Lake City, a suburb of Seattle, only minutes away from task force headquarters. Multiple suspects had just robbed the bank. As soon as we jumped into Mike's car, Seattle police radio traffic exploded. Codes, locations, units responding. This wasn't just a chase anymore. It was a countdown. Hollywood was back on the streets, and the entire city of Seattle seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice came over the radio. Makeup. Theatrical makeup. Pancake makeup. That was it. In that instant, everything clicked. One thought raced through my mind. This is him. This is the moment. Hollywood. Then another call came in. A witness had seen a car leaving the bank parking lot, driving in a zigzag, erratic pattern. Police radioed in. Vehicle description matches. Possible getaway car spotted. Hearts started racing. Sirens screaming. The vehicle was checked. The engine was cold. False alarm. Hollywood had slipped away once again. 20 minutes had passed since the first alert, and with every passing second, only one question remained. How far could he be by now? After the false alarm, Detective McGowan was certain of one thing. Hollywood had probably already switched vehicles, because that was his pattern. Think about it. Remove the makeup, take off the wig, change clothes, hide the weapons, secure the cash. You don't do that in the middle of the road. You need a safe place. And McGowan knew a van was the most likely choice. He turned the car into the side streets, the residential neighborhoods near the bank. From previous robberies, McGowan and Agent Wesley already knew something important. This was where Hollywood abandoned his first disguise. This was where he switched vehicles. Every driveway, every parked car was a possible hiding spot. Eyes scanning the street. The radio suddenly quiet. Heartbeats getting louder. Because if the guess was right, Hollywood was very close. Other units were rushing toward a different location, but McGowan's instinct was screaming, "No, that's not it. They're heading the wrong way." McGowan hadn't just patrolled this city. This was his home. Every street in Seattle, every corner, every shortcut, he knew them by heart. For a few minutes, they crossed several main roads, and then a white van, parked on a quiet side street. McGowan pulled the car in behind it, and what he saw next, the windows were fogged up with heavy condensation. There was so much condensation that water droplets were literally running down the inside of the glass. I mean, heavy condensation. And then, movement inside the van. Flashlights, shifting around. This was not an empty vehicle. This time, something felt very different. A flashlight flashed for just a second through the van's dark, tinted windows. McGowan's gut feeling was no longer just a feeling. That's Hollywood. They radioed in to check the license plates. Emergency lights switched on, but the van's driver didn't stop. The vehicle slowly started moving forward. At that moment, one thing was clear. He was running. Investigators had no idea how many people were inside the van or how many weapons they had, but one thing was almost certain. If this was Hollywood, he was carrying his 9mm Glock. McGowan later said, "At that moment, I realized he knows we're behind him. He could see them. They were visible in his mirrors. And the second he realized it, he accelerated. This was no longer surveillance. It had turned into a live pursuit." The van headed northbound, then gradually slowed down. A voice came over the radio. "Be prepared. Approach the idling van." As I stepped out of the car, what I saw next stopped me cold. A man holding a rifle. He stepped out from the side and aimed it directly at me. In that moment, I honestly believed I was about to be shot and die right there. The rifle fired. Bullets tore into the rear of the van, and in that instant, the chase ended. The firefight began. Investigators returned fire at the fleeing van. The night before Thanksgiving, 1996. Just seconds earlier, 3 investigators had come face to face with death. For the first time, Hollywood hadn't just made threats. He had opened fire. And now, this was no longer just a bank robber investigation. It had turned into a deadly war. A man armed with a rifle. Investigators were now convinced there was more than just a random suspect in that van. Hollywood himself was involved, Seattle's most elusive bank robber. At that very moment, Special Agent Sean Johnson's pager went off. One glance told him everything. A bank robbery had just occurred. Johnson immediately called the office. The response was clear. The description matches. Hollywood just robbed the Sea First Bank, Lake City branch, North Seattle. Johnson was several miles away at the time. Engine roaring, siren screaming. He pushed the car to full speed without hesitation. As the van sped through the streets, as new reports came over the radio, one name echoed across Seattle: Hollywood. And this time, he wasn't just running, he was fighting back. Backup units had arrived, siren screams from every direction. The gunman quickly ducked back inside the van, and the chase started again. The van was now being pursued. Every second meant greater risk. Every second brought them closer to death. Because until that van stopped, Hollywood's game wasn't over. Then, the van suddenly disappeared around a corner. McGann's instincts kicked in immediately. Could this be an ambush? If the van had stopped and the gunman was waiting for them, McGann made a quick decision. Just like they had trained for, he ordered the canine officer, "Cover the right side. I'll move in from the left." And then, lights flashed ahead. A Seattle police cruiser appeared, its emergency lights blazing. The trap was closing. Hollywood's escape routes were rapidly disappearing, and the confrontation now seemed unavoidable. A Seattle police cruiser intercepted the van, forcing it off the road. Impact. The van crashed to a stop in the front yard of a house. The biggest question investigators had now: how many people are inside? "All right, police!" Suddenly, the side doors flew open, and then the truth began to emerge. One suspect had been shot 3 times, in the left shoulder, in the thigh, and one bullet still lodged inside him. The second suspect had also been hit, in the right shoulder. McGann looked down at the wounded man, gasping for breath. "What's your name?" The man replied weakly. "Steve." McGann asked again. "Steve what?" And the answer he gave would soon unlock one of Seattle's biggest mysteries. Steve Myers. McGann immediately asked, "Are you Hollywood?" The response was immediate. No. The second suspect didn't match the security camera photos either. He was taller. He had a heavier build. And that's when police realized something shocking. Neither of these men was Hollywood. The detective's mind raced immediately. Then where's the third one? "Are you saying one suspect ran off?" Officers shouted back. "Yes, as soon as we arrived, he jumped out and ran." Oh my God. Hollywood wasn't in the van. He was on the ground. And just like that, a massive manhunt was launched. Ground teams spread out across the neighborhood. Air support began scanning from above. Somewhere on the streets of Seattle, one man was now running alone, and the entire city was chasing him. The third suspect, believed to be Hollywood, was still on the run. Police were almost certain that he was armed, but the questions were terrifying. How far could he get? What tricks would he use to escape? As the search continued, the forensics team began examining the van, and what they discovered was chilling. In the back of the van was a guitar case, but it wasn't an ordinary case. It had been modified to carry a gun. Next to it was a blue nylon bag, packed with cash, and it wasn't a small bag. The robbers had left behind more than $1 million. And then, investigators found pieces of a latex mask, most likely worn by Hollywood. Blood on the floor, shattered disguises, clues scattered everywhere. everything pointed to one thing. This man wasn't just hiding, he was dangerous, and he was still alive. Across the city of Seattle, one name now echoed through every radio channel: Hollywood. Hollywood once again slipped through the FBI's fingers. After 4 years of relentless pursuit, the masked bank robber, now responsible for his 15th known robbery, was still free. Agents quickly moved in on a new lead: a 20-acre ranch in Olympia, Washington, about an hour south of Seattle. And there, as investigators began searching the property, they found a semi-automatic 9mm Glock, $23,000 in cash, and dozens of disguises and masks. The masks, the money, the weapons, everything pointed to the same conclusion. This was the man known as Hollywood, who had managed to elude the FBI for 4 years. Seattle could finally breathe a little easier, but the legend of Hollywood was far from over. Investigators also found canvas athletic shoes, the same type Hollywood had worn in several of the robberies. Agents then approached the barn behind the house. Inside the barn, tools, construction materials, and equipment were scattered across the dusty floor. One agent noticed something unusual: footprints leading toward a trapdoor. The trapdoor was opened, revealing an underground chamber. Is there a light switch? The agents had no idea. Hollywood could still be hiding down there with a gun. But when they searched the space, Scurlock wasn't there. Instead, behind a curtain, the agents made a shocking discovery: a secret hideout, fully equipped, with evidence of careful planning everywhere. Hollywood's secrets were finally beginning to surface. In a second room, agents discovered something even more revealing: a complete makeup studio. Makeup materials, brushes, powders, prosthetics, everything meticulously arranged. Investigators even found a photograph of Scurlock without makeup, the man behind the masks, the man who had been hiding behind the identity of Hollywood. Behind the barn, Special Agent Sean Johnson and his team discovered something incredible: a massive treehouse built about 60 feet high among cedar trees. The structure was 3 stories tall, with multiple ramps extending between the trees. It was truly something to behold. Agents searched the treehouse, but there was no sign of Scurlock. Meanwhile, police continued patrolling the neighborhood where the shootout had occurred, making sure no suspect escaped and backup remained ready. One by one, Hollywood's layers and secrets were being uncovered, but the mastermind himself was still somewhere out there. Seattle had become a city on edge, a suspensive battlefield. Through the night, search teams combed the neighborhood, but the fugitive left no trace. Then suddenly, a new report came in. A man claimed he had seen someone hiding behind a camper in the backyard of his mother's house. Police responded immediately and moved toward the camper. Officers announced their presence, but there was no response. Tension was building. One officer sprayed pepper spray through the camper window, and then gunshots exploded from inside the trailer. Police immediately set up a perimeter around the camper and called for reinforcements. Agent Sean Johnson was just returning from the search of Scurlock's property. Every angle was tense. Every step carried danger. Hollywood was still calculating his moves carefully, and for the FBI, this had now become an official high-stakes showdown. I had only been back at the office a few minutes. The evidence hadn't even been unloaded yet when I heard over the police radio. Shots exchanged. The location report came in, only 2 blocks from the previous night's shootout. The decision was instant. Even before unloading the evidence: don't stop, we're heading northbound, out of town. Lights on, sirens screaming. Every available unit was now converging on the scene. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser had gone home after the shootout. McGann later joked to himself, "No time to cook the turkey. Right now, the only focus is catching Hollywood." At this point, the entire FBI and local law enforcement were concentrated on one target. Just as they were about to leave, a call came from the office. Hollywood has barricaded himself inside a trailer. Since the initial exchange of gunfire, no further shots had been fired. The situation was extremely tense. Investigators even brought Scurlock's ex-girlfriend to the scene, hoping she might convince him to surrender. But there was no response. No one was completely sure who was actually inside the trailer. But one name echoed through every conversation: Hollywood. Every moment felt heavier. Everyone was waiting for the final confrontation. Inside the camper, the suspect had run out of options. The SWAT team was called in. Investigators decided, we'll flush him out. 2 rounds of tear gas were fired into the trailer. But still, no sound, no movement. SWAT officers approached cautiously. Over the radio came the first report. McGann's immediate reaction: is this guy a ghost? How can there be no body? Then, seconds later, we've got a body. Through the drifting smoke, officers saw a white male lying motionless. It was Hollywood. The end of a 4-year relentless chase. Seattle could finally breathe again, but the legend of Hollywood would never be forgotten. The body lay on the floor, a gun beside his head. Investigators compared the body with Scurlock's photograph. Match confirmed. Hollywood's real identity was finally revealed. Scott Scurlock, a struggling local actor who had lived a double life. Later, the coroner determined that the death was self-inflicted. Seattle's masked nightmare was finally over, and the mystery of Hollywood had at last been uncovered.